Good morning and welcome back. This is World Talks coming to you live from Warsaw. Hungary's resistance to supporting further sanctions on Russia has become a significant point of contention within the European Union. The Hungarian government, led by Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, has consistently expressed opposition to additional punitive measures against Russia. Hungary argues that these sanctions, which include economic restrictions on Russian sectors like energy and finance, harm the European economy, in particular Hungarian industries that are heavily reliant on Russian energy supplies. To unpack these arguments and discuss their long-term implications, I am joined here this morning by Andreas Umland, analyst from the Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Good morning, sir. Thank you for joining us. Much appreciated.
Good morning. Thanks for having me again.
So, Péter Szijjártó, Hungarian foreign minister, already said that his country will not support an additional package of sanctions on Russia, the 16th package of sanctions. So, an unanimous vote is needed for the package to pass. So, I guess it's not going to happen, right?
I think it is going to happen because Hungary is a part of the European Union, and both other member states of the European Union and the organs, the institutions of the European Union will be putting pressure on Hungary to confirm this new package. This is all a very odd story because Hungary itself has been suffering a lot, both from the Tsarist Empire, from the Soviet Empire. The idol of Vladimir Putin, the former KGB head Yuri Andropov, whom Putin has identified as a sort of example, was the Soviet ambassador in Budapest in 1956 and has been then overseeing the crushing of the insurrection, the Hungarian insurrection against Soviet rule. So this is all a very odd story, and it's a shame, I think, also frankly, for the Hungarian people.
Right, and what measures can the EU use to sort of coerce Hungary into voting the way it needs to?
That would be something to ask people, somebody in Brussels. I think it's mainly about the technicalities of financial support. Hungary is, oddly enough, although it's very much against the European Union, against the entire European project as it is formulated in the treaties of the European Union. Hungary is nevertheless a benefactor of the European Union. It's getting a lot of money from the European Union. And against this background, I think there will be then also some way to bring Hungary to confirm this vote.
Right, so let's take a closer look at what does this package actually entails. The measures are to impose visa bans and assets freezes on 48 new individuals and 35 entities, up from 34 individuals and 18 entities named in the European Commission's initial proposal in January. So this brings me to the question on frozen assets, right? Polish Prime Minister has urged the EU to act regarding these frozen Russian assets. Do you think this is a viable idea? Will this happen?
Yes, first of all, I think this new sanctions package has now a double meaning. It's not only a practical way to pressure Russia, it's also a very important measure now in contradiction to the American approach to this war. And once it is adopted, it will be an important signal. The issue of the frozen Russian assets is already there for almost 3 years now. And one wonders why this has not been already used, this money, to support Ukraine 3 years ago. So hopefully, better late than never, this is now resolved. And of course, this is now especially urgent as it looks as if the American support for Ukraine is declining or will even discontinue fully. And so Ukraine needs this money, and it could be also something that would be beneficial for the European economy, because some of this money will be used then to buy weapons from European countries or other supplies.
Right, and I mean, what would you say to, because I've heard some voices that some of this money will be used for reconstruction efforts on Ukrainian territories that are under Russian occupation at the moment?
Yeah, but that would be only once they are liberated. I think that is an idea that Russia has been now floating, that they would agree in a future sort of victorious peace for Russia, that some of this money is used then indeed for reconstruction, but Russia would like to use it on its occupied territories for itself, so to say, for the enlarged Russia, as Moscow sees it. I don't think that is something that is acceptable. So that would be an absurd, actually, usage of this money. It would then actually support the violation of international law, these annexations, and the terror regime that Russia has created on the occupied territories.
And you've mentioned the change of stance of the US towards Russia. And of course, we've all heard Marco Rubio saying that there are new opportunities, right? I mean, both geopolitical and economic with Russia after his talks with Lavrov. So my question is now, CPAC is underway in Maryland, in the US, so with lots of conservative leaders present there. So do you think that this American approach, being more lenient towards Russia, will it be sort of infectious? Will we see that sort of coming from more politicians in the EU and also in other countries?
I just hope that the American conservative elite will come to its mind, because what we're seeing here now is a total undermining of the logic of non-proliferation of weapons of mass destruction, because what is obviously here happening is an attack of a nuclear weapon state against a non-nuclear weapon state, assisted, by the way, Russia, the nuclear weapon state, by a second nuclear weapon state outside the non-proliferation treaty, North Korea. And now another nuclear weapon state, the United States, may be taking part in securing for Russia a victorious peace, a partial capitulation of Ukraine. And that all means that this non-proliferation treaty, which forbids countries to have nuclear weapons, seems to be made for nuclear weapons countries, for the big countries, to then take apart these smaller nations. So this creates a totally new world in which the weaker countries will rethink their national security and will think about weapons of mass destruction, perhaps not atomic warheads, but chemical weapons or biological weapons. So everybody will, in this new world, be for himself or herself, and we will be entering a new era in world history with proliferation of weapons of mass destruction.
Right, this is really ominous. And just, talking about, the US versus Europe, we see these divergent stances on the issue of Russia and, of course, what's happening in Ukraine. So do you think that the rift between the US and Europe will be deepening, of course, also taking into consideration what Vance said during the Munich Security Conference and, all these things that happened over the past week?
I hope not. This is also something, at the end of the day, what the United States, and especially I would think the conservative leaders should consider as being not beneficial to the United States, whatever they may think about values and ideologies and LGBT issues and all these things that are secondary, let's put it that way, for international security. But here, the national security and the international security of Western country is under threat from this strange culture war that the US is now bringing into world affairs, and with which it is now attacking Europe and is trying to push Europe in a different cultural direction than the US thinks. But that will be bad at the end of the day for the US, because the US also needs the allies, as we have seen after 9/11, when the US was supported within NATO, via NATO, in its operation against Osama bin Laden in Afghanistan.
Right, but it sort of does seem that Europe is sort of on its own at the moment, or will be on its own in the near future. And of course, we have Polish Prime Minister's plan, right, to, like we said, use the frozen Russian assets and, of course, boost protection right over eastern flank, and then, of course, introduce these amendments to EU funding so that more of it can go towards defense. But do you think that this is a sufficient plan, or are there some other measures that the EU should introduce to sort of, be more robust in the face of this potential, change?
Yes, I think these things would partly have to happen anyway, and so far maybe people like Trump are right that we had a somewhat disbalanced situation in the past in which too much of the security and defense issues were sort of given into the hands of the US. So Europe needs to protect itself. So some of that is actually healthy if it happens. A concrete thing I think that is also being discussed, like the frozen assets for 3 years now, is our no-fly zones over Ukraine, over the nuclear power plants, over big cities. Let's say over Kiev, where many of Western diplomats are located. So there are good reasons to create these no-fly zones to assist Ukraine in a way similar in which Israel was assisted when it was attacked by Iran. So that would be a thing that could be started immediately, and that should have been also started already in 2022.
And Andreas, just to round up our discussion before we go, of course, we started with sanctions, so perhaps a basic question, but still, I believe, quite controversial. Are sanctions working?
Yes, they are working, not to the degree that we expected and that we hoped for, but without these sanctions, Russia's war would have been more successful. The Russian economy would have been stronger. And also the sanctions are, of course, a signal to Russia, a signal to the world. They have a symbolic meaning. So they have their role. They just don't play quite the big role that we thought at the beginning they would play, and they would not be as easy. They are not as easy, as it turns out, because there are many countries then that try to benefit from these sanctions, taking advantage of the cutting ties between the West and Russia, and which do not have these sort of humanitarian qualms about supporting Russia's war economy and this attack also on the, as I mentioned, on the non-proliferation regime. So this is a sad conclusion, but still the sanctions do play their role, and they are important, and they are really a matter also for Moscow of concern, as we know from the negotiations where sanctions play apparently a prominent role.
And with this thought, we're going to conclude. Andreas Umland, analyst, Swedish Institute of International Affairs. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
and thank you for watching World Talks. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.